2018 Vacation Bible School adult class. If you're joining us on the internet, we are studying this week about God's creation. We really appreciate in the adult class that it is pretty deep. The teenagers on down, well, actually, we're going to be covering about what we're covering here, but from the focused on Genesis, the first and second chapter, and then also some on what happened at the flood. What we're going to be doing in this class is giving you additional information that will help you to be supportive of children or grandchildren when they ask questions about creation. The plan for this week is we're going to start today with looking at designs demand a designer. And we got a little bit of that in the skit if you were here earlier today. Tomorrow we will look at creation versus evolution. Then on Wednesday our plan is to review some evolutionary hoaxes. On Thursday we're going to talk about dinosaurs. And you say, well, why in the world do we want to talk about dinosaurs? Well, dinosaurs are one of the things that people use to undermine creation. If you go into Pink Palace Museum, especially on the first floor up there in Memphis, you're going to see a whole lot of stuff about how old these bones are, and it'll get into millions and millions of years. We have some excellent information to share on Thursday that will show you that dinosaurs are not millions of years old. They were created at the same time that everything else was created. They're contemporary with man, and we'll show you undeniable evidence that a whole lot of misinformation is being shared with people across the United States. A lot of the information that we're going to be talking about is information that has been covered to some extent with Brad Harrop when he was here the two times that he's been here at the Boonville congregation. And then on Friday we'll finish up with creation in 6 days or 6 billion years. We do not have a book to pass out for you, so I've tried to put most of the information that we're going to cover on the screen so you can read it there. If any of you desire to get written information, I can give any of you copies of this information that's on the screen. As I indicated, today's lesson is Design Demands a Designer. If you wanted to have a memory verse for this lesson, I would think that the 19th Psalm, verse 1, would be a good memory verse. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows His handiwork. The intent of this lesson, or the summary of it, is that the amazing design of the universe and all its content prove that God exists. The aim is to demonstrate to us that biblical faith in God is founded on solid evidence of design which demands a designer. You know, when Paul was writing to the Romans, he said in Romans the 16th chapter, "For I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes, for the Jew first, and also for the Greek." And we're familiar with that, but what he said right after that really relates to the lesson that we have today. "For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, the just shall live by faith. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even His eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse." God has given us a lot of evidence. You walk out at night and you look up into the sky on a clear night and see all of those galaxies and stars and planets up there, the logical mind should be able to correlate that that didn't just happen. And I think that's what God is having, or the Holy Spirit is having Paul write about here. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify Him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. The world, if you think about the world in which we live, it is a marvelous place. And you know, a close look at the universe reveals many details of God's design. Evolutionists tell us that our bodies and all animals and plants and even the universe came into existence by pure chance. You may have heard the illustration about an explosion in a print shop. But, you know, if you had an explosion in a print shop, one of those old-fashioned ones where they had all the letters and everything there, and coming out of that explosion, you found it had created a Webster's Unabridged Dictionary. Well, the possibility of that happening is greater than the possibility of this whole universe just happening. You know, that should make any person with a logical mind know that we have to have a designer here. We are going to see that these things are too amazing and complex to have come about by chance. When we see an automobile or a computer, we know that it took brilliant men and women many years to design and make such useful tools. We do not assume that cars and computers just happen. We were on the way back from Pigeon Forge on Saturday, and we stopped off in Athens, Tennessee, and toured the Mayfield Dairy. Now, that's not all that complex, you'd think, but they were packaging milk there, and we got to tour the milk packaging factory and see how they package 300-gallon jugs of milk a minute, and see how they make their own milk jugs. You know, those kind of machines didn't just happen. You know, it took some kind of designer to design all of that processing equipment and how to fill those machines and put the labels on and package them up. It would be illogical for us to think that things that complex just happen. Now, when I pull out my cell phone and think about all the things this cell phone can do, I know it took a designer behind that. And so, why would we think, when we look at things all around us that we know have to have a designer, why would we think that the complexity of the universe, the complexity of insects, the complexity of plant life just happened? Evolutionists believe and teach that our universe is the result of an unplanned, undesigned Big Bang. According to them, the universe just happened. We're going to go through and look at some of God's little creations today. But we're going to start with something big. We're going to start with the size of the universe. Because our universe is enormous. Even the finest telescopes can't see to the end of it. There are a lot of stuff in the universe, and scientists have estimated that the universe is as much as 20 billion light years in diameter. Now, I don't know how they knew when they got out to the edge of the universe, but let's just take that and say that that's a fact. You know, 20 billion light years. And light travels at 186,000 miles per second. There are 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 60 minutes in an hour, and 24 hours in a day, and 65 days in a year. So if I multiply all that together, I get 31,536,000 seconds per year. And if I multiply that times 186,000 miles per second, I get almost 6 trillion miles per year that light can travel. So in round numbers, scientists estimate that the universe is going to be 20 billion light years times 6 trillion miles per light year wide. And if my math is correct, that's about 120 quintillion miles wide. Now, that's pretty big. I was just thinking about this Big Bang theory. If everything just started from one central point and everything blew up, and then how long would it take that stuff to go all the way out the 120 quintillion miles? And you know, matter usually doesn't travel as fast as light does. So it's going to have to travel for a lot longer time than they say was the beginning of the universe. You know, estimates that I've heard are 5 billion, 6 billion, maybe 10 billion years old. Well, just the size of the universe makes that number way too low if you're going to follow their kind of theory. There's an estimated 100 billion galaxies in the universe and 25 sextillion stars. That's a 25 with 21 zeros after it. And even though there are many more stars than we can count, did you know that God counts the number of stars and calls them all by name? There in the 147th Psalm, praise the Lord, for it is good to sing praises to our God, for it is pleasant and praise is beautiful. He counts the number of the stars. He calls them all by name. Great is our Lord and mighty in power. His understanding is infinite. I think about some of these television shows where they got all of the kids. I think it was the Duggars they had on for a while. What did they have, 18 or 21 kids? A lot of kids anyway. I just wonder how those parents thought of names when it got to be number 21. But just think about God and God naming all the stars. He knows how many are there, and He calls them all by name. Great is our Lord and mighty in power. His understanding is infinite. But just a little bit of local news. The Milky Way galaxy in which we live contains approximately 100 billion stars and is so large that even traveling at the speed of light, it would require 100,000 years to cross its diameter. So what does the tremendous size of the universe tell us about God? Psalm 19 verse 1, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows His handiwork. It is mathematically impossible for life to live on just to have happened. I wanted to give you this illustration. I have given it before here, but just assume that we've got a bowl of pennies, and they're sequentially, chronologically numbered. We've got one that's dated 1961, 1962, 1963, all the way up to 1970. The odds of me putting my hand in that bowl and pulling out a penny that is dated 1961 is 1 in 10. There are 10 pennies in that bowl. Now the odds of me, and I put that penny back in the bowl, the odds of me pulling out a 1961 penny and then a 1962 penny. Now when I put the one back in the bowl, and the odds of pulling out a 1962 penny is still 1 in 10. But the odds of having first pulled out a 61 and then pulling out a 62 is 1 in 10 times 1 in 10, or 1 in 100 of doing that. The odds of pulling them all out in sequential order is pretty astronomical. The odds of the first penny being dated, well, I had a 50 there in this illustration, but same thing. The odds of getting all 10 of those pennies in chronological order is 1 in 10 billion. Now that's just a very simple illustration. And when you start getting the mathematical probability of us living on Earth in a life-sustaining mode or in an environment that would sustain life, and those things just happening by coincidence becomes an astronomical number, a number that is mathematically impossible. Now we're going to take a look at this basketball, and I got out of my mama's old sewing kit. She had oh my, I had stuck one of her pins in here, and that thing has fallen out. I hope I don't sit on it. All right, I want you to consider a pin head. You know how small a pin head is? And then I want you to consider this basketball. Now, a pin head compared to this basketball is a comparison of the size of the earth to the size of the sun. Now, Brother Adrian, would you come up front, please? And what I'd like for you to do is to take this basketball back to the back pew. You don't have to dribble all the way. Okay? Now, Brother Adrian knows all about basketballs. He was a star basketball player at the Wheeler High School. That's even his basketball. He brought it to me this morning. All right, and if I've got that pin head right here, and that basketball is 90 feet, that's about what Adrian is back there at the back, that's a pretty close representation to the distance that the earth is from the sun, 93 million miles away. Now, if Adrian walked forward 3 pews, okay, if the distance of the earth to the sun, as represented by where Adrian is now, actually was, we wouldn't exist because we would burn up. We'd be too hot. Now, Adrian, back up to where the door is now. You know, if it was just 10 feet relative too far back, or 10% back, we'd freeze to death. Thank you, Adrian. And yet God created everything so that it's just right. We're just the right distance. Come on in. Come on back, Adrian. "10 feet closer, everything melts. 10 feet farther away, everything freezes. But God, after He created everything, said, 'It is good.' And it's good because He created it perfectly for what He had in mind. And that was for a wonderful place for us to live. Now, the earth is rotating on its axis at 1,000 miles per hour at the equator and moving around the sun at 70,000 miles per hour. It's approximately 19 miles per second. If the earth rotated much faster, fierce cyclones would stir over the earth. If the earth turned slightly slower, the days and nights would be impossibly hot or cold. And yet when God created it, He created it just right. An orbit of 365.25 days, remember we have leap year every 4 years, together with the tilt of the earth on its axis allows for seasons. The earth's orbit is not a perfect circle, but is elliptical. Sometimes the earth is closer to the sun than at other times. In January, the earth is closest to the sun. In July, it's farthest away. When it is closer, the earth speeds up to avoid being pulled into the sun. When it's farther away, it slows down so that it remains in position in space that is just right. The earth moves in its orbit around the sun. On average, it departs from a straight line by only 1/9 of an inch every 18 miles. If it departed 1/8 of an inch, we would come so close to the sun, we would be incinerated. If it departed 1/10 of an inch, we would find ourselves so far from the sun that we would all freeze to death. So just think about this. God's design for the rotation of the earth and the orbit of the earth around the sun was perfect for creating seasons and sustaining life. It is not surprising that God would say His creation was good. The earth is also just the right distance from the moon. The moon helps control ocean tides. Tides are an important part of Earth's current. Without these currents, the ocean would stagnate, and the animals and plants living in the ocean and the seas would soon perish. Our existence as humans depends upon the moon-induced tides, which helps to balance a delicate food chain in nature. If the moon were moved closer to the earth by just 20%, the tides would be so enormous that twice a day they would reach 35 to 50 feet high over most of the earth's surface. But God designed it to be just right, and that's why God said it was good. Can a rational person reasonably be expected to believe that these exacting requirements for life as we know it have been met just by accident? Like picking those pennies from the bowl in the right chronological order. It is mathematically impossible for the earth to have all this stuff just right to sustain life. The earth is exactly the right distance from the sun. It is actually exactly the right distance from the moon. It has exactly the right tilt. It has exactly the right amount of ocean water. It has exactly the right weight and mass, and you could go on and on. Were this many requirements to be met in any other essential area of life, the idea that they had been provided just by accident would be dismissed immediately as absurd. Yet atheists, agnostics, skeptics, infidels suggest that the universe, the earth, and life on the earth were all here as a result of coincidental happening. We're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to look at design in the animal kingdom, because when you look at design in the animal kingdom, design demands a designer. We're going to start with something real small. We're going to start with the bombardier beetle. Any of you familiar with the bombardier beetle? This is a real interesting little character. The bombardier beetle is one of the most amazing creatures on earth. When threatened, the small insect points its abdomen at an antagonist and fires a spray of boiling hot chemical. Inside its body, it has tiny glands that secrete two chemicals into a storage tank, known as collecting vesicle. Those chemicals are hydrogen peroxide, the same solution you'd put on a skinned knee, and hydroquinones. If an enemy attacks the beetle, it empties these two chemicals into a special explosion chamber. Then it adds special enzymes to the mixture, and as a result, the chemicals form a solution that reaches the boiling point of water. That's 212 degrees Fahrenheit. In just a few seconds, the beetle takes aim with two small gun-like projections on the rear of its body and fires the boiling mixture into the face of the attacker. Boom! The chemical shoots out and the beetle goes merrily on its way. How many of you think that just happened? That is an intricate design, and it's buried in that little old bug. Design demands a designer. Now, these kind of complex designs don't just happen. Let's look at a woodpecker. All right, the woodpecker's skull is constructed with a suspension system that allows it to absorb the force of lightning-fast repetitive strokes on tree trunks. A woodpecker can peck bark 40 times in less than 3 seconds. And he can do that without harming its brain. Now, you know there are some autistic symptoms that children have. And you probably have seen videos of this, and sometimes the child will bang its head back against a wall. And we don't want that child to do that, because we know that a child can have a lot of damage doing that. There's a whole lot of things about pro football right now, and all the concussions and the long-term life impacting effect that a lot of concussions can have. And so you'd think that most woodpeckers ought to be going around about half crazy, okay? The forces involved in a woodpecker's hammering are incredible. The suddenness with which the head is brought to a halt during each peck results in a stress equivalent to 1,000 times the force of gravity. This is more than 250 times the force to which an astronaut is subjected in a rocket during liftoff. You might have heard that astronaut had to experience 4 Gs. Well, the woodpecker is having to experience 1,000 Gs. In most birds, the bones of the beak are joined to the bones of the cranium, the part of the skull that surrounds the brain. But in the woodpecker, the cranium and beak are separated by a sponge-like tissue that takes the shock each time the bird strikes its beak against a tree. The woodpecker's X-shaped feet are perfect for climbing, allowing the woodpecker to move in any direction on the tree trunk. In addition to the X-shaped feet, the woodpecker has stiff yet elastic tail feathers to press against the tree in order to support its weight while it drills the trunk. The bird also is well equipped with a long sticky tongue to excavate trees and extract ants. Often extending 5 times farther than the beak itself, the tongue is so thin that it can reach into ants' nests in trees. The tongue is able to neutralize the poison from the ant bites. The nerve endings precisely located in the fluid-filled sacs between the collagen fibers of the tongue provide the brain with the information about the type of material contacted. In this way, the woodpecker knows whether it has secured an insect or hit wood. Perfectly designed for its purpose. Each tool is necessary for the woodpecker to effectively occupy its ecological niche. And without its unique cranium, feet, tongue, tail feathers, the woodpecker would fail at what it does best, pecking wood and finding insects. Now, how many of you think that all of that just happened? I'm not seeing very many hands go up. Think about feathers. That's a lot of different kinds of feathers. I remember the time when people used to sleep on feather pillars or have a feather bed. I can remember going to my grandmother's house and getting buried in the feather bed, and how warm it was on a cold winter night. Well, feathers are useful for things other than just feather beds and pillows. Bird feathers are an amazing thing. Each feather has a shaft running up its center, and attached to its shafts are veins. The vein is composed of thread-like barbs. The barbs give the bird its aerodynamic design. Each barb has thousands of smaller strands attached to them called barbules. Each strand is hooked to an opposing strand, much like the hooks of a zipper. Think about a crane feather. One crane feather alone has about 650 barbs on each side of its shaft, and each barb has about 600 barbules, and each barbule is locked together with 390 hooklets. The hooks come together like the teeth of a zipper. As I've read about this, it sounded a lot like Velcro to me also. If the hooklets come apart for any reason, the bird can return its feathers to their original form by simply straightening its feathers with its beak. So I would say that feathers are one more testimony that there was a very smart designer designing what these birds have. But you think about the human body. A human body is composed of over 200 different kinds of cells, totaling approximately 100 trillion cells in an average adult. And these cells come in a variety of sizes and shapes with different functions and life expectancies. For example, some cells are so small that 20,000 would fit inside a capital O from a standard computer font, each being only about 0.05 of a millimeter long. And some cells placed end to end would make only 1 inch if 6,000 of them were assembled together, yet all the cells of the human body, if set end to end, would encircle the earth over 200 times. That makes those cells mighty small. Even the largest cell of the human body is unbelievably small, being only 1/100th of an inch in diameter. Skin is wonderful. It's an amazing organ. It protects you from wind, rain, bacteria, yet it contains little holes called pores that allow you to sweat and cool off on a hot summer day. It is the largest single organ of the human body. If the skin of a 150-pound man were spread out, it would cover 20 square feet of space and weigh about 9 pounds. The skin is also a pretty busy area. A piece of skin the size of a quarter contains 1 yard of blood vessels, 4 yards of nerves, 25 nerve endings, 100 sweat glands, and more than 3 million cells. 1 square centimeter of skin contains 6 million cells, 100 sweat glands, 200 pain points, 25 pressure points, 12 cold sensitive points, and 2 heat sensitive points. There are a lot of design elements to skin. It is a protective fortification that keeps harmful bacteria from entering the human system. It is a waterproof wall that holds in the fluids of the body. Our bodies are about 75% fluid. If we didn't have the skin, I guess we'd just spill all over the floor there. And with its pigment, melanin, it shields the body from harmful rays arriving on the earth from the sun. The skin, many nerve endings make it sensitive to touch, cold, heat, pain, pressure. Thus, it is a major sense organ. The sweat glands help eliminate waste products and also function in cooling the skin. The oil glands lubricate the skin and help keep it soft, while it is at the same time providing a waterproofing system. Though soft, the skin is quite durable. The skin absorbs ultraviolet rays from the sun and uses them to convert chemicals into vitamin D, which the body needs for utilization of calcium. The skin is therefore a chemical processing plant for the entire body. Now, I know this might get boring when you keep talking about all of these design elements, but the point we're trying to make is that there was a designer there. This didn't just happen. This was there because of the great intellect of God. The human eye. The human eye is one of the most complicated mechanisms in the world. It gathers over 80% of the knowledge that is transmitted to the brain. The brain is connected to each eye by over 600,000 nerves that send it messages at a speed exceeding 300 miles an hour. The eye receives 1.5 million messages at the same time, sorts through them, and sends them to the brain. The retina covers less than a square inch and contains 137 million light-sensitive receptor cells, 130 million rods allowing the eye to see in black and white, and 7 million cones allowing the eye to see in full color. On any given day, the eye may move about 100,000 times using muscles that, milligram for milligram, are among the body's strongest. The body would have to walk 50 miles to exercise the leg muscles an equal amount. The eye is self-cleaning. Lacrimal glands produce tears to flush away dust and other foreign matter. Eyelids act as windshield washers. The blinking process, 3 to 6 times a minute, keeps the sensitive cornea moist and clean. And tears contain a potent microbe killer that guards the eyes against bacterial infection. During times of stress, one eye will rest while the other does 90% of the work. Did you know that? Then the process is reversed, allowing both eyes the equal amount of relaxation. We need to think about what the Hebrew writer said. For every house is built by someone, and he who built all things is God. He who built us in our complexity is God. He who built that bombardier beetle in its complexity is God. One does not get a painting without a painter, or a musical score without a composer, and just as surely, one does not get purposeful design without a designer. The design inherent within the universe, from the starry sky to the magnificent eye, testifies that God does exist. Romans 1 and verse 20, for since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even His eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. They are all of these people that are saying we got this just by chance. I would not want to be classified as an evolutionist, an atheist, an antagonist. I would not want to be promoting something that would undermine the greatness of God. And that's what we're trying to do this week. We're trying to give enough evidence from 2-year-olds all the way up to let them know that creation is real, that God created everything and He did it with His spoken word. If you want to do some additional study, I would suggest that you go to Job 38 through 41. We're going to look at chapters 40 and 41 later. Chapters 40 and 41. In chapter 40, he describes the behemoth, which I believe is an excellent description of a dinosaur. And in chapter 41, he describes, I believe it's called the labyrinth, but if you go back and you read it in detail, it's a fire-breathing dragon. I didn't really think about fire-breathing dragons being in the Bible, but they are there in chapter 41. And you go back and you look at history in a lot of different cultures. In a lot of different cultures, there is discussion about fighting fire-breathing dragons. Didn't know the Bible talked about it, but you ought to read 41 in detail about that. And we'll talk more about that in that lesson on Thursday on the dinosaurs. I appreciate you listening to this total lecture. I'll try to, as opportunity presents itself as we go through some of the other lessons, let you throw in your comments, but that was the material I had prepared. Would any of you like to add anything to this concept that design demands a designer? What shirt do you have on today, JT? Did you wear that when you said you were going to wear? JT's shirt says, billions of years ago, there was nothing, then it exploded. Theory of evolution. On the back, evolution, violating scientific laws since 1859. Hashtag Darwin was wrong. Hashtag evolution requires miracles. Good summary. Thank you for being here. You got a short class.